Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life.
We all make choices through our lives, choices on how we show up in front of other people. We make choices on jobs that we might want to move forward with. We make choices with the friends that we surround ourselves with. And through making those choices, we create a life that gives us an opportunity to learn and grow in ways that we may not imagine as we start making these choices. But the choices lead us to becoming more of who we're meant to be. They give us opportunities to develop certain gifts and talents to share with others. They give us opportunities to see the world in a way that will help us have compassion and empathy for others around us. They help us see the world in a way that gives us opportunities to be more of who we truly are meant to be by putting things in front of us that help us help others, that help us help ourselves, and help us become what we know from the time that we're born, what we're meant to be. And we start sharing ourselves in a way that others can start sharing themselves. We find opportunity to grow and expand. We find opportunities to be grateful. We find opportunities to share ourselves with a world that is looking for us. I'm with Frank Rich today. Frank is a former bodybuilder, entrepreneur, men's health coach, and the host of the Superhuman Life podcast. He's also the founder and CEO of Rebuilt Recovery, a company that provides fitness training as well as one-to-one coaching for men aiming to break free from porn addiction. After battling addiction, depression, and anxiety for almost 20 years, his mission is to help suffering men take back control of their lives through the power of faith and fitness. Frank has been seen and featured in USA Today, seen on ABC, NBC, Fox, and so much more. Frank Rich, are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
I'm ready to dive in, brother.
I'm so excited to have you here. Really to look at someone who's so aligned with my purpose, but we're in different markets, we're in different areas, we work with different people, and I think it's so important for all of us to know that we do come to this world with purpose, and it's not shying away from people who have the same purpose as we do, but it's coming together in that purpose and making a difference in a world. And so I really appreciate you coming on the podcast to share who you are. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing in the world, Frank, and how that's making a difference right now?
Absolutely, Vince. And I love what you shared there, right? You know, that's abundance thinking, abundance mindset, realizing like, you know, 1 + 1 can equal 3 if we join forces together. And obviously our impact is going to exponentially grow if we work together as opposed to working against each other. So right in line there with you and your mission. Yeah, for me, so you kind of mentioned it there in the in the intro bio. I launched a podcast almost exactly 3 years ago. So it was July 8th, 2022. And this came after a series of life transforming events. And I know we'll kind of get to maybe some of those wake up calls and so forth a little bit later on. But for me, it was always a dream to have a podcast. So I've been in this kind of personal development high performance world for a very long time. I got a background in bodybuilding, corporate leadership. So I've always been about growing and building myself up to become the best that I could possibly be. But I've also always wanted to help others, whether that was as a trainer as a coach, as a manager in some of my previous positions. So for me, launching the podcast was something I've always dreamt about, really since I stumbled across Lewis Howes, probably around late 2014, who's the host of the School of Greatness, probably one of the biggest podcasts in the world. I struggled, though, to get the message across until, like I said, a series of life-transforming events for me. So I launched a podcast back in July of 2019. And Vince, that podcast has changed my life. It's changed the way that I see the world. It's changed what I've been able to do. And it's led me to launching a business that at the time when I launched the podcast, I didn't even know really about the industry. I didn't know that there was actually guys out there that were helping other people overcome porn addiction. So podcast started first because my life changed and I wanted to help other people through a message there. And then that led me to creating and launching Rebuild Recovery, which in the last 2-ish plus years, we've had about 3,000 men go through our courses, books, coaching, and programs. And I've been fortunate and blessed to work with about 170 guys in a one-on-one coaching capacity, helping them overcome their addiction to porn. But more importantly, I believe my mission is to help men become better men. And we do that by helping them get off porn first and then rebuilding and reshaping their lives to become the men that they were created to be.
In 3 short years, that's quite a footprint. So congratulations on what you've been able to do in this short amount of time. There's so many things I want to ask you here, but I'd like to start out with what were some of the wake-up calls that really started you moving towards helping others? But then I'm in my research, I saw that there was a spiritual awakening, and I'd like you to share that also.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they're tied together. Probably should have had multiple wake-up calls through my 20s and 30s, as kind of living a different life. And, I can look back at some of those situations I put myself into, some of the decisions and choices that I made, and the fact that I got out of them and I'm here today is just a reminder to me that I am here for a purpose, and God has always kind of had his hand on my life. I would say the spiritual transformation started about a year, maybe 2 years, roughly, I think a year and a half prior to launching the podcast. So I'd been in the entrepreneurship space for about 6 years at this point, and I was ready to make a pivot, make a transition, and get into the online coaching business. And in order to do that, I knew that I needed some help. Like, one of the biggest things I've learned from being a bodybuilder, from really being deep in the personal development space, is that you don't have all the answers. And if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with other people, right? So I hired a business coach back in 2017 to help me launch an online coaching business. And Frank Rich Fitness, it's still something we have today, very small segment of what I do. But hiring this coach introduced me to what, for me, Vince, was the first time being around strong Christian men. So you brought up, the spiritual transformation. For me, I am a Christian. I'm a believer, and it's now become the most important thing in my life. It wasn't a part of my life growing up, but in 2018, when I got introduced to these men, it began to show me a different side of men, a different side of masculinity. Men that were driven by purpose, men that were driven by service, men that were leaders in their communities, leaders of their home. Still all the same values, like strong, physical, like willing to push themselves. Like, this is what attracted me to them. But then when I got close to them, it was their heart that drew me in. It was how they loved me, how they accepted me without knowing anything about me. And one thing I've tried to take from that into my life now is I believe, as a believer, as a Christian, our call is to show up differently so that people ask why. And that's what these men did to me, is they loved me and they respected me in a way that I needed to know what was the unifying thing between all of them. And over the course of about 18 months, Vince, it just grew on me. And it grew on me to the point when things weren't going well in my life, that I thought that church was going to be the outlet. Literally, like, I'm standing in my kitchen one day after struggling to get this business off the ground, and I was in a relationship at the time. And I remember looking at Stephanie and being like, Steph, I don't understand. Why isn't this working? I'm doing everything that Dan is doing. I had the funnels built the way that Mike has them built. I had the email marketing. I had the social media. Why aren't these things clicking the way that they are in these guys' life? I'm like, maybe we need to go to church. All these guys go to church. Maybe that's the missing piece. And at the time, my girlfriend, she's an ex now, we're no longer together. she had been raised Catholic, so she had kind of walked away from the church based upon some things that had happened there. But she was open. She's like, I can kind of see where you're going with this. I'm interested in entertaining this with you. But Vince, we didn't do anything from that point. It was just a conversation. It was a seed that was planted. If we fast forward about a month forward, I'd gotten a call from a very close friend of mine. And this friend was somebody that I met in that original business mastermind. His name is Josh. And Josh and I had stayed connected for the entire time, like 2 years. We spoke almost daily, if not weekly. And Josh said, hey man, I'm coming down. He lives in Pennsylvania. He's like, I'm coming down to Florida. Why don't you drive over to Orlando? We'll hang out together. We'll have lunch. And I said, sounds great, man. I can't wait to see you when you're down here. So I picked him up, and I'll try to make this story short. And if I get too long-winded, Vince, cut me off. But I picked him up at his airport, or at his hotel, I'm sorry. And we drive down to downtown Orlando. Anybody that knows downtown Orlando knows that one of the main streets there that runs perpendicular to Amway Arena, which is where the Orlando Magic play, is Church Street. This wasn't my plan or intention to take Josh to Church Street, but we found a steakhouse. And we sat in there. It was a Wednesday, Thursday afternoon. So there was like nobody in the restaurant. Us, and maybe 5 other people. So we sit down. The waiter comes over. Josh says, "Hey, we're gonna be here for a long time. Why don't you just bring us some water?" So that happens. Waiter comes, brings us the water, and Josh looks at me. He's like, "Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Now, granted, Josh had known me for about 2 years. He knew all the good. He knew all the bad. He knew the wins. He knew the struggles. He knew the failures in my relationship. He knew the failures in my business. He knew dynamics with my family. He knew everything about me. He said, "Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?" I said, "Sure, absolutely, Josh. I love you, man. You can ask me anything you want." He goes, "How's your relationship with your father? And what do you know about Jesus?" And Vince, that moment there, I was just taken back, right? I had planted the seed a month prior by telling Stephanie, I think we need to look into this. So not to get too detailed, because I've shared this a lot on my podcast. We sat there for a couple hours, and Josh shared the story of the gospel. He shared from Genesis all the way through Revelation. He explained to me why we're here, what role God has played in our life, and what the role Jesus has played in salvation for each and every single one of us. And he asked me at the end of that lunch if I was ready to accept Jesus into my life, and I was. So we walked outside. There happened to be a history center right across from the steakhouse. Josh placed his hands on my shoulder, and we prayed together for the first time. Now, the interesting thing here, Vince, is Josh had flown down to Florida from Pennsylvania. He had brought in a Bible, a copy of the Passion Translations with him. And he knew that it was for Frank, but he thought that it was going to be for Frank from the conference that he was going to, not for Frank, his buddy that he was having lunch with. So we drove back to his hotel. He's like, "Dude, I gotta get you a Bible." He's like, "I have one in my hotel." So we drove back to the hotel. He gets this. He writes a little message in there for me. 10/22/2018, it was the day my life changed. He put the location outside the History Center. And that woke me up, right? Because not knowing what to do next, I just got in the Word. And Josh was very adamant, like, get in the Word, find a church. Get in the Word, find a church. I'm like, well, what does this mean? Get in the Word, find a church. Over the next 4 months, man, like, God just started to show himself to me. And really through, I guess, what would be the sanctification, right? Like, I began to look at the way that I wasn't showing up and living as a Christian man. I stopped drinking. I'd gotten a little bit unhealthy at that time, so I needed to do something physically. And 4 months later is when I made the decision to remove pornography out of my life. So yeah, I mean, it's been a series of events. But I think the big moment there was that day in Orlando with Josh, because that's when it all kind of came together.
Well, the messages come to us when we're ready, and the doors open when we're ready, and everybody's getting messages somewhere or the other. It doesn't matter the religion. It doesn't matter the direction you're going. Everyone is free to believe what they want to believe, but each of us need to listen for those messages and open the doors when the doors are made available to us. Let me ask you this, Frank. When did you know that you really wanted to start helping others?
Yeah, Vince, man, I think that this has been something that's been a part of my life for forever. You mentioned, the messages come when we're ready. I think for me, I mentioned it a couple of times, like how deep I was into personal development and into growing and evolving and becoming the best version of myself. And I've been able to look back now reflexively and be like, yeah, you were searching for God the entire time. I was looking for answers in books. I was looking for answers in in bodybuilding. But for me, I've like at 18, 19 years old, I was running a staff of almost 15 at a local grocery store. Like I was a stock manager. So I had employees that were sometimes 2 times my age. These were guys that were 40, 50 years old that were taking direction from me. So I think leadership is something that I don't know if I was innately born with it, but I've developed it over my teenage years, but I've always wanted to help people. The problem for me, Vince, is the help it wasn't effective until I helped myself first. And I think that a lot of people like this, they use this as, I don't want to say an escape, but a lot of people think that if I go try to help other people, like that's going to solve their problems. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson. I mean, he's one of the greatest philosophers, current modern day philosophers, has a couple amazing books, 12 Rules for Life, Beyond Order. In his first book, 12 Rules for Life, one of the 12 rules is clean up your room before you go out and save the world. And it's not literally like clean up the mess in your bedroom. It's like take care of your own life, take care of your own problems. Like, because if we focused on the individual first, if every single person listening to this stopped worrying about other people and focused on themselves and turned a mirror around and said, what things am I short in? What shortcomings do I have? Where are my struggles? Where are my setbacks? And all we did was each one of us woke up every single day and tried to become the best version of themselves. I think that we would see a completely different world than what we're experiencing right now. So I think, Vince, to answer your question, I've always wanted to help people. I had to get out of my own way first in order for the helping to become effective.
Just about everything in our lives, we have to learn to get out of our own way. And I think it truly is an inside job. And we share that in Imagine Miracles. We share that on most of the podcasts, that to love others, you need to love yourself first. To be able to lead, you have to lead yourself first. It's all an inside job. And I think you mentioned it earlier when you shared, it's about being an example. The example that, first of all, others set for you, but then the example that you go out and set, which is huge. It's, I've done a lot of research on you, Frank, and looked at what you've done in your life and the businesses that you run and the difference that you've made in people's lives. You just don't picture people that are bodybuilders having a problem with depression and anxiety. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I think one of the most important things that I believe we put the podcast together for was to help people see that they weren't alone, that there are others just like them. And I think if you share that story, it'd be very helpful.
Yeah, man. And maybe giving the audience an inside look into the fitness and bodybuilding community, I would say probably having spent a decade plus in the industry, you probably have a higher percentage of mental health issues and disorders in the fitness bodybuilding community than you have in the general population. Just there's kind of like, there's no evidence supporting that, or, that's just clearly kind of my opinion in anecdotal research. But no, I think it's something that people will use, once again, bodybuilding as an escape, right? I mean, this was a problem in my life where bodybuilding became such an addiction. Like, Vince, the first time I competed as a bodybuilder, I ate 6 meals every single day for 16 weeks at the same exact time. It became a compulsive issue in my life, so much to the point that I was working in a kind of a call center environment. We're doing a lot of outbound calls at that time. If I was on the phone and my alarm went off to eat, I would actually lie to the prospect and say, hey, I got another call coming in right now. I need to take this. Can I call you back in a little bit? And I would hang up the call to eat my food. So bodybuilding was an addiction and struggle for me. And I think where people find solace in it or comfort in it is bodybuilding. You control the variables. You can control what time you eat. You can control what time you go to the gym. You can control how many sets you do, how many reps you do, how much sleep you get. So you're in control of all these variables, but what you're not in control of is the thoughts, right? The feelings that you're struggling with. I don't remember the exact question. I went off on a tangent here. So can you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd like you to share a little bit about the depression and anxiety that you experienced.
I think a lot of people throw the word depression around like if they're not having a good day. Like, like they're looking at a stack of bills or something, or looking at a task list, or they got rejected or something by making a pass at a woman or a man or whatever. I think it's just become kind of once again, it's a safety buzzword. It's like, I'm depressed, so my life isn't going well. Real depression, Vince, I don't know if you've ever dealt with it. For me, the way that I've tried to describe it to people is it feels like you're sitting in an empty room and the lights are off, but the walls are collapsing in on you. And there's no way out because you can't see the door, you can't see the lights. So you literally feel like the world is collapsing in and around you. And there's nowhere for you to go other than to constantly have things pressured up against all sides of you in a kind of a 360 way. So that's what I've experienced as depression. I mean, fortunately, I've never, acted on these things. I've definitely had moments where, I've contemplated ending it. And it's just a dark place to be at, man. And I don't know if the depression became a byproduct of my porn addiction or if the porn addiction became symptoms because I was depressed. Because I saw depression for a long part within my life, whether it was in my home with my parents or it was in other people in my family. So a little background about me as well is I come from 4 generations of men taking their lives. So I have a cousin who's my generation. I have an uncle, I have a grandfather, and then a great grandfather. Not my grandfather, but within that generation of men within my lineage. So, genetically, I think for a long time, I just believed that this was something that was just passed down to me. It was something I was supposed to be a part of. Like, oh, you're not going to have a happy life like everybody else because you're rich, and rich men are not happy and depressed. So, those were my experiences with it. For me getting out of it, it's obviously been my faith, number one. And then it's taking responsibility in my life. I think that's been the path to me overcoming that, realizing that all days aren't going to be good. There's going to be setbacks, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be tribulations that I need to work through. The only path to working through these things is realizing like I'm in control of what I do in these moments, not what happens to me, but how I respond to those things. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Vince, but yeah, depression is a dark place to be. I feel it's abused sometimes, but those are my thoughts around it.
It's definitely a buzzword, but it's not just a buzzword in our society right now. There's many people that are experiencing depression and anxiety, and younger that we're seeing it. So it's something that we do need to talk about. And I've never had an opportunity to talk about porn addiction on the podcast. Could you help both the addicted person and the significant other of the addicted person understand porn addiction a little bit?
Yeah, Vince. So I had the opportunity to interview Stanford's head of addiction on my podcast, Dr. Anna Lemke. Wrote an amazing book. Anybody that's into reading and wants to know more about the brain, dopamine, and how it responds to addictive behaviors or substances, check out Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke. But Anna defines addiction as the repeated or continual use of a substance and or behavior despite negative consequences to self and or others. I get a lot of pushback, Vince, because when you look at the DSM-5, which is the clinical book, which recognizes addiction, pornography is not in it. And this is going to change, obviously. I just think that it's early on in the game because they have video game addiction and they have gambling addiction, like pulling of a slot machine. So your brain is responding in the same way. But if we use Anna Lemke's definition, repeated use of a substance and or behavior despite negative outcomes or negative consequences to self and or others. So one thing I think a lot of people get confused is they believe that if you watch pornography, you're an addict. And that's not what I'm trying to say. You can drink alcohol and not be an alcoholic. You can do recreational drugs. You have free will to make those choices. Not something I would tell you would be a good idea to do. But just because you do it doesn't make you a drug addict. But there's certain people that are going to be more susceptible to those things, right? Well, it's going to be the same thing with pornography. So the way that our brain responds to the consumption of internet streaming pornography, I think is very important to preface this context with internet streaming pornography. I'm not talking about a magazine, which was what I got introduced to. I'm talking about the access to what we have on the internet, which is infinite, and it's readily available at the drop of a hat, right? So the way that the brain responds is very, very similar to any high dopaminergic drug. So when you consume pornography, it spikes your dopamine. When you take a hit of any drug, cocaine, meth, it spikes your dopamine. And because dopamine works on a cycle, it's a pain pleasure cycle. So if you get a spike, obviously if you get a spike, something works on a cycle. In order for it to return to baseline, there's going to be a dip. So where the problem comes is that it's this repeated use where these guys are getting these hits of dopamine. The problem that I'm seeing in the world is the vast majority of the men that I'm working with are 25 to 32. We've had some younger men. I've had men well beyond that, 40s, 50s. I've even had a handful of clients in their 60s. But because this generation, I don't know, it would be Z or X or whatever it is, like the age demographic of 25 to 32. This is the first demographic that has literally been born and raised with devices in their pockets 24/7. It wasn't a problem for me until I was in my 20s. So these young boys, these young men are literally getting hooked on this thing before they've even experienced any real intimacy with a woman. What fires together wires together in your brain. So they're conditioning, training themselves, and hardwiring these neural connections that intimacy, sex is something that you consume, not something that you participate in. But you asked me to kind of, educate it. It is a real thing. If anybody, is out there is like, there's no such thing as porn addiction. Yes, it is. If that's your response, what makes you qualified to say that? Or how do you define addiction? Because I gave you a very clear definition of addiction when I started speaking. So based on that definition, which is coming from the world's leading doctors studying this for 30 plus years, we can see that if you're continuously using it and it's having an impact on your marriage, if it's having an impact on your mental life, it's having an impact on your productivity, if it's keeping you away from doing your schoolwork or doing your job, if it's impacting your intimacy with your wife, those are the negative consequences that we need to understand, and it's the repeated use of that. So yeah, it's a real thing out there. I think there's a 2019 Barna research study that they interviewed men. So if you had a group of men, let's say 100, 1,000 men, and you just ask them, how many of you have watched porn in the last 30 days? About 70% of the hands in that audience would go up. So let's say we have 100 men, 70 of them would have consumed pornography in the last 30 days. Now of those 70, if you ask them, how many of you believe you have a problem with it that is out of your control? Somewhere between 40 to 50% of those men. So we've taken 100, we've now compressed it down to 70, and of that 70, almost half of them, so 35 to 40 of those men would have a real porn addiction. So out of 100, we're going to bring that number down to about 35 to 40. So 35 to 40% of the men walking the earth today, right now, will admit, or the ones that will admit, I believe the number's probably a little bit higher, but let's just say 40% of men right now are struggling with porn to a level that they do not feel they have full control over it.
So you shared with us, Frank, that you experienced depression, anxiety. The addiction may have brought the depression on, or it might have just been a symptom of all of that. And then you woke up to, hey, I want to be different. I want to live the life that I'm meant to live. I want to show up and get to helping people like I've wanted to do all my life. I know that Christianity, religion helped in that process, but could you share how gratitude helped you on that process?
Oh man, yeah, I think gratitude is, I think it's one of the greatest tools that you have in real time to literally change your state of mind, to change your perception of the world. Thinking about anybody that's struggling with depression, like what is depression? Like you're worried about like the past, like you're living in the past. Anxiety is you're projecting yourself into the future. You don't have control over it. Depression is something that's happened in the past and you can't get out of it. Well, what is gratitude? Gratitude is forcing you to live in the present and show appreciation for what you have. Well, can your brain both be worried about the past and appreciating the present moment at the same time? No, it just can't be possible. So if you ever find yourself just like in a dark, cloudy space, like this can be done any point. Like this can be done 3 o'clock in the afternoon, driving down the highway. You're like, I just feel like crap right now. Let me pull over and express a little bit of gratitude. There's some cool kind of, neurochemicals that are released, serotonin, dopamine, that kind of, release throughout the brain, make you feel really good. But another really powerful part is I believe when you learn to express gratitude every single day in your life, things to be grateful for begin to appear more regularly in your life. Our brain has this thing that's called a reticular activating system. It's a part of our prefrontal cortex, and what this does is this filters out what's not important to us and shows us throughout the world what is important to us, realizing like there's a lot going on that we can't pick up on. We wouldn't be able to handle it. And I think the best way for me to demonstrate this, because everybody has experienced this probably at one point in their life. If you've ever bought a new car, you go out, you're kind of shopping online, you're looking at, let's say Red Mustang. You're like, I'm going online, I'm looking at the details. I'm maybe going to a couple different lots. I'm test driving them. Then you sign that paperwork, you ink the deal. You're like, damn, I'm so excited, man. I got this brand new car. Look at me shining. I pull it off the lot. The minute you pull it off the lot, what happens, Vince?
You see all the red Mustangs.
You see the red Mustangs everywhere, right? You see the one at the gym. You see the neighbor 3 houses down. Wait a minute, he's got a red Mustang in his garage. Did he just get that? No, that red Mustang was there the entire time. What happened though is the reticular activating system. You begin to tell your brain that red Mustangs are important. So with gratitude, I believe when you can spend some time every single day, first thing in the morning, 3, 4, 5 things to write them down to be grateful for. What happens is you tell your brain, you are a person that lives in gratitude. You are a person that looks for things to be grateful for. So you'll be walking down the street and you'll just see like a lady walking her dog, and I'm like, I'm so grateful that dog has an amazing owner that's going to take her out on walks, and they're not living in a shack somewhere. So I think I don't want to say it's a way to like trick yourself, because it's not a trick. It's just a way to leverage and use these tools. Vince, I took a trip up to North Carolina, just talking about this reticular activating system, like 6 weeks ago. I got a dog here sitting right behind me as we're recording this. So he goes on all the road trips with me. Well, I got to Franklin, and we had spent about 10 hours in the car the day before getting up there. And I'm driving through Franklin, and I'm like everybody in Franklin has a dog. Like I was just seeing all the dogs like in the car. And I'm like, this is weird. So in the entire week I was up there, I'm literally like everywhere I go, I'm seeing dogs driving around with their cars. And I was like, this is awesome. I love Franklin. I'm going to visit here more because there's just a dog friendly town. Well, I get back to Tampa, Vince, and literally like it hasn't stopped since. I've been home for 6 weeks, and I will drive every single day. And this hasn't been the case in the past. I see 2 or 3 dogs being driven around in their cars. And it's just like, wow, this is really cool. It's like, it's showing me like these things that I talk about, like I'm actually experiencing. It just brings me a lot of joy to talk about this. But yeah, I think the gratitude thing is so incredibly powerful for 2 reasons. A, you can't be down and depressed and not feeling good about yourself when you're looking for things to be grateful for. And a more powerful tool of how it begins to show you more things to be grateful for.
Awesome. Where we put our attention is what we attract into our lives. Quantum physics tells us that. And as you said, you can't be in a high vibration and low vibration at the same time. It just doesn't work. So if you find ways to move yourself into that high vibration, you're going to, one, attract more of the things that you want. But I think it was great that you shared in the way you did, Frank, because if we're in the now and looking for things to be grateful for, we truly train the subconscious to look for those things. And that's why, as you shared, these dogs are popping up in all these cars all of a sudden. So how exciting. Believe it or not, we're close to the end of our time, and I want to make sure that you get an opportunity to share a piece of parting guidance with the imagination. What would that be?
Vince, you kind of mentioned it at the beginning, right? I have a podcast. It's called The Superhuman Life. I've lived what I feel has been kind of an interesting life here in a series of experiences. But anybody listening to this, I just want you to know and understand that you are here for a purpose. But understanding that and knowing that is really only half of the equation. I think this is where maybe what I've seen a lot of Christians, and I'm not knocking Christianity here. I see a lot of believers though that struggle because it's set your eyes on God. It's read the scripture. It's read the Bible. Well, what are you doing after that? So knowing that you're here for a purpose is the first step. Taking aggressive action every single day to develop yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, to become the person that you were created to be is the second half of the equation. And when you're aligned with your purpose and you're living with intention every single day, that's what I believe creates a superhuman life. So if you're out there and you're struggling to find your way, know that there's a calling on your life, but probably you're struggling because maybe you're not showing up enough intentionally in how you're living. So begin to live intentionally, and I think the purpose will find you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Frank. I couldn't agree more that taking action on knowing is the most important thing that can happen if we really want to make that difference that we're meant to make. And you are definitely making a difference in the world. And I can't tell you how much that I appreciate it. And I know the whole team at Imagine Miracles appreciates it. How can people get in touch with you, Frank?
Yeah, obviously anybody listening to this, if you're into podcast, I have a podcast. We're on all the platforms, so Apple, Spotify, Podbean, wherever you listen, we're there. It's called the Superhuman Live. It's an interview style show, just like what Vince is doing here. I like to get underneath people's thoughts and actions and know what led them to get there. So we do one episode a week. We're 135 episodes in at this point. So I'd say find us on podcast, the Superhuman Live. If you want to connect with me personally, Instagram is probably the best way. It's Coach Frank Rich. And anybody that kind of wants to explore some of the porn addiction stuff, say probably YouTube is the best place there. We do a video a day, and we have for almost exactly 2 years now. The YouTube channel is Coach Frank Rich as well.
Thank you so much. All that information will be available on Frank's show page. Just go to themiracleyou.com. Look for Frank Rich's episode. That information will be spelled out for you so you can get in touch with Rich, learn more about what he does. Frank, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you for what you're doing in the world and for sharing your story. Everyone needs to have a story to look at and understand that they're not alone. And you shared one that will touch so many people. So thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Vince.
On behalf of my wife and business partner, Mary, the entire team here at Imagine Miracles, we want to wish each and every one of you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 Mind Awakening Steps Toward Your Unique Purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.